Thank you, everybody, for coming in today. And I will start with the formal items at the top of the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Apologies for absence have been received from Mayor Brabin, Councillor Denise Jeffrey Wakefield Council, and Councillor Carol Patterson of Kirklees Council. Councillor Moses Crook is attending as substitute for Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I'll turn to the committee and see if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest, please. I don't see anybody putting their hands up. I'll move on to item 3, which is exempt information, please. And there is one exempt item. Do you want to...
Yes, the exempt item is within item 9. It's the Corporate Risk Register, Appendix 2.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of December. Is everybody happy with those, please? I take it everybody is. That's great. And I'll turn to item 5, which is the corporate performance report. And Sarah, please.
Thank you. And I'm hoping I'm not going to cough my way through this presentation. I'll try really hard not to do that. But thank you. So I think we came last time round with a slightly different kind of way of presenting quarterly performance to yourselves and to the committee. And what we've done this time round is follow that kind of similar kind of process. I've got a short presentation really just to kind of take you through some of the key points really, rather than kind of walking through the whole of the report really. But just in terms of summary, this report, it provides an update on quarter 3, and that's from October to December 24-25, and we did the reporting in January to pull this together for yourselves today. And I think what the report is also doing is continuing that thread around how we want to strengthen performance reporting, assessment and management over this period, and we've got quite a lot of work in train, which is trying to get us to a position where we're doing this better every time that we come to speak to yourselves about this, and there's quite a lot of work internally within the organisation. So just key points really overall is we're in a similar position to quarter 2 at the moment, with a small decrease in areas of work where we were risk it to delivery exist, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. There's a clear theme arising in relation to resourcing. This picks up on a similar theme that we had last time round, where as part of a lot of the work that's taking place in the organisation, there's kind of been a rapid expansion of work that's happening, and there's lots of mitigations in place to address kind of risks arising. We've been doing a lot of work through business planning, for example, to kind of address that. I'll come on to some of the other issues towards the end of the presentation. And we're also working on a new performance management framework, and I think that's going to be really helpful for us all across the organisation and the partnership, about kind of providing that structured approach to evaluating performance, setting goals and monitoring progress. We have a lot of data within the organisation. We have lots of information that we're considering, and kind of how we look at that and how we kind of monitor progress across the piece is really, really important, so that we get a really good overview. And what the performance management framework will intend to do is try and get us moving forward on that, and having a really structured view of kind of where we are at that organisational level. So just to move us on, just in terms of headline outcomes, I think if you look in the report, we've had some really good areas of progress over this last quarter, and you'll see in there that there's been quite a lot happening around bus reform, in terms of kind of the transition plan, and actually after quarter 3 into quarter 4, there's been some significant progress around kind of the lotting strategy, around the depot strategy, and around brand, and that work's going to continue, and obviously that will flow into quarter 4 reporting. Even as we're talking about some of quarter 3, things have kind of moved on, and I think it's important to kind of recognise some of that. There's also been work on mass transit, which I'll come on to in a little while. And there's been a significant amount of work that's taken place around strategy development, so particularly around the climate environment plan, which has been quite a lot of consultation on that, and that's coming to the CA at some point in the near future. And there's been quite a lot of discussion around that, around our partner agencies. The local growth plan, which was kind of adopted in December, work around the local transport plan, and also the police and crime plan, which was kind of approved in December as well. Lots of work on new business growth and skills model implementation, and you'll see in there, in terms of summary, some really good kind of performance in terms of some stats around people accessing employment and self-employment, which is really good to see. And we're continuing on the business support. So these are some of the real key headline pieces of work that the CA is working on, as well as kind of us taking forward work on multi-year business planning and our budgetary plans for this forthcoming year. I guess in terms of headline outcomes for quarter two, what you'll see there's been a small increase in the number that have kind of moved up to blue from 39 in quarter two to 14 in quarter three. A small number increase from kind of 64 to 69 that have gone from up into blue amber, and then a number that kind of a decrease from quarter two from 19 to 11 of amber reds. But we have seen a small increase in the number of reds that are reporting as being at risk to delivery and a barrier. And one of those is an area that we picked up during the last presentation to the committee. I think if you look at it across a mission base, and we are kind of doing this on a more regular basis now, what you'll see is that there's kind of a similar trend between quarter two and quarter three. So what you'll see is that in quarter two there were 4 missions that were broadly operating at kind of that blue amber level, and mission 4 that was operating at amber red, and that's continued to kind of move into the same space for quarter three. And obviously in your pack you've got the full detail of all the measures that are making up kind of that progress. But what I wanted to do today is just to really pick up on kind of areas where we're delivering and it's progressing as planned, or we've seen a kind of that upward trend really. So as you'll see there, in terms of performance on the Adult Skills Fund, there's deliveries now moving from quarter two, where it was amber red, moving to quite a strong position in terms of being on track to meet key performance indicators, which is good to see. And actually in some areas it's kind of is overperforming. So that is I think from where we're at quarter two, there's been a significant turnaround there. In terms of development of the Growth Hub, consultants have been working around the development of work alongside us and our partners around what that might look like. And there's further conversations taking place now with partnerships, but again on track for delivery, and hopefully that's going to be finalised now in quarter four. And I think that's a significant move forward in terms of that service, in terms of how that will operate across the region. So good progress there. In terms of the culture, heritage and sport framework, what you'll see there is that kind of, as we know, really good progress around Bradford 2025, City of Culture being launched, and with the event Rise, and it's really great attendance. I think that with 28,000 people kind of attending over that weekend, and lots of events that are taking place. I think really good to see that happening within the region and in Bradford, and lots of estimated impacts there that will equate to kind of nearly 7,000 jobs. In addition to that, the Cultural Heritage and Sports Committee approved the 29-30 action plan, including kind of pan-regional approaches to activity over 2025. And what they're looking at is kind of how we sustain some of the work that is taking place currently, and making sure that there's a legacy to some of that work over this coming period. The Strategic Place Partnership, I think this we talked about this last time round. There's been some really good progress there. From a partnership perspective around including dementia-ready housing criteria into plans for inclusion in policy development, and that's a really significant milestone across the region, which is going to have obviously have great impact for local people. And we've also secured some resource around safer parts principles through winning kind of some impact award from the University of Leeds. Just in terms of moving on to Mission 3, Well Connected West Yorkshire, obviously Bradford Interchange reopened during quarter 3, 5th of January actually, so it's just slightly outside of quarter 3, but a lot of the work that has taken place to kind of get there has had a really big impact, and I think that again is good progress from where we were at the beginning of last year. There have been challenges around operation of lifts, but they've all been resolved now, and there's remaining work to repair concrete course is due for completion in May 2025. So again, that's improved from where we were during the last quarter. I talked about mass transit just earlier on, but the mass transit public consultation has come to an end, and work has taken place to kind of do the analysis on that, and that is being considered at the February 2025 combined authority meeting. A lot of planning and work is taking place now for phase 2 consultation which is scheduled for January 2026. But there's quite a lot of planning taking place to make sure that that kind of proceeds and meets timescales and goes well. I think at the bottom of the screen there on housing decarbonisation, 2024-25, 852 properties have had retrofit measures installed. I think you can't see it on the bottom of the screen, but we know that a lot of those homes have had those measures put in place are in areas that have got areas of high deprivation. So it's really good to see that work is progressing, particularly from the place that it was last quarter when we came to you and talked about that. So just moving on to areas where perhaps progress hasn't been kind of gone as expected in this last quarter. So the top one there is around asset management, and there's work taking place around condition survey at the moment, and that's been delayed, really potentially because we've been prioritising work on Bradford Interchange. That delay does present some risks in relation to the condition of our assets, but there's some work, urgent work that is being instigated in this current quarter to kind of try and progress that and move that forward. I'm sure other colleagues might want to jump in on that one as we get. But what we've done is agreed a slightly different start date for that work, which will take place in Q1 2025-2026. The next two areas around the West Yorkshire Transport Fund and the West Yorkshire Transport Model. And as you'll see for the Transport Fund, the expenditure target is currently 67 million for the current financial year. And we're currently, as of the end of Q3, we're reporting spend at 36.1 million due to projects not progressing to delivery as anticipated. There's quite a lot of work taking place behind the scenes to make sure that we kind of move that activity forward during this next quarter and spend as much as we can. I think capacity, so this is one of the running themes that we've talked about throughout during the last presentation. This one is cited as a bit of an issue really, and that's not just within the organisation but with partners in terms of taking schemes forward. But as I say, work taking place to mitigate the impact of that where possible. And the third one is one that is around the West Yorkshire Transport Model, and that model has been developed. It's not yet ready for general use, and some of the work that's taking place at the moment is around engaging with partners on how that model might work. And again, some capacity issues there in terms of strategic manager that there's some recruitment taking place to try and get that person in person and move that work forward. But that's going to be a critical piece of work when we get that moving. And I'll just take one deep breath because my mouth's gone very, very dry. The next one here is the one that we talked about last time around, which is around carbon impact reduction. And that title is probably a bit, probably not kind of reflective of what we're talking about here. This is around the tools that we've got in place for developing and measuring carbon impact reduction. And I think we reported last time around that we'd had a movement of staff. There's quite a lot of work taking place at the minute around the toolkit for this, and even though it's reporting red at Q3, we're expecting that there's going to be some resource kind of put in place to kind of mitigate this work in the next quarter up until March, and that work's taking place in tandem with work on the climate and environment plan. So we're hoping to see a bit of a shift in that over the next quarter. And then I think the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership Solar PV and Battery Storage Project. I think here we are falling quite short on target. I think at the minute the current position is around 120 homes that have kind of had the solar panels installed by the end of Q3, and I think at the end of the year the target's 500. We know that this is a 2-year target, so even though we're not kind of hitting the areas that we want to, that we do feel that there's time to kind of hit that by the deadline that we want to hit it. There's some work taking place with arm's length bodies, which is causing some challenges to hitting that target, which is also taking place so that we can kind of really move on with that moving forward. And then the final one is around zero emission buses there. So as you can see in terms of that data there, that has been delayed really partly because of battery supply chain issues, which has meant that we've not been able to kind of procure that further 15 buses that we've needed to during this time period. So that's kind of just a snapshot of some of the key areas really, and I think what we did say last time around is it's what we're trying to do is be transparent about the areas where we know we've got to make more progress, and I think that's really important for this committee to kind of have oversight of that. We'll be doing more around this as we kind of move towards that new performance framework. I think risk, as we've just talked about, particularly around internal resource capacity, and we've done a lot of work through business planning over the last few months around identifying where we need additional resources to deliver some of our key priorities. There's a lot happening at the moment, and what we're trying to do, as you see there, is a lot of work around things like workforce planning to make sure that we've got the right resources in the right place. As Joe has been working on, kind of really looking at our smarter working policies and workforce agility, and looking at where we've got kind of cliff edge employment ending, so that we can really mobilise our resources and get people moving across the organisation in much more of a flexible way. And that has been, to some extent, in the past, been kind of links to kind of funding streams has been really made that really difficult to kind of move people around. And we are looking at how, with the help of Damon and finance colleagues, about how we can kind of move away from that kind of linking people directly to projects, so we have got much more flexibility. And obviously our internal governance, looking at arrangements about how we can speed up processes for making decisions and kind of assurance and accountability frameworks. And what we're hoping is that over time that we'll see some of this helping with some of the issues that we've got around some of that kind of organisational risk. Just finally, as I said, we're doing quite a bit of work around the performance management framework as we move forward, and we think that's going to be really, really helpful in terms of making better informed decisions and ensuring that we've got alignment with our organisational objectives. So a really clear link between the performance framework and the work that we're doing around the corporate plan and business planning to make sure that we're really clear about what needs to be delivered over this coming period. That's going to be vital in terms of making sure that the resources are following the priorities essentially. And what we're also doing is doing a little bit more around ensuring that our relevant performance metrics are kind of consolidated, which I said earlier on. Actually, when you've got a lot of data, it's really easy to kind of miss the key points, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got an eye on everything really. And that will include not only progress around the business plan and corporate plan targets, but also making sure that we've got EDI measures and productivity and efficient measures included in that, which will give that single overview. And what we will be doing is bringing that performance framework back to yourselves for you to have a look at at the end of probably at the end of the year, before we start reporting into the new financial year. I'll stop there, Chair. And if anybody has any comments, then I'm happy to pick them up.
Thanks, Sarah. Quite a lot there. Councillor Scullion, please.
Thank you. There was a lot there, actually. And thank you for the report. And there are pleasing bits in it, definitely. I read it in conjunction with the report we've got later on the agenda in relation to risk. And maybe some of my comments might stray onto that. In some ways, what the Combined Authority are facing is very much like the dilemmas, challenges we're facing in local authorities in terms of inflation, costs, market forces, and capacity to deal with those things. And I was interested that Sarah touched on some of the ways in which things are trying to be joined up, because it seems to me that in this next phase of the Combined Authority, we're really going to have to be a bit more agile in terms of thinking ahead, because always with a performance report, you're looking at past performance. And as we move to a more consolidated, coordinated, trailblazer type deal as the organisation matures, I think we are going to have to think more about how some of these things are joined up, rather than just how do you meet the government's needs for that particular spending pot with the constraints in it. And one of my concerns really is about that capacity within the organisation for that thinking ahead. There was reflecting on things like, electric vehicles, depot strategy, the way in which technology is changing, and how some of the people we have working here in the Combined Authority need to be thinking ahead to where we're going to be in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and thinking about some of the challenges and benefits of that work, really. But in some ways, that is part of the risk, really, as I said before. And it's about having people who are really good at modelling and forecasting. I'm not suggesting we employ somebody with a crystal ball, but if you could get close to that, that would be really good. Thank you, Chair.
Mystic Meg's busy this week. Sarah, please.
I think that's a really important point. I think it is one that we have picked up on in terms of some of the conversations around perhaps thinking about scenario planning as well, and really getting into that kind of thinking about the future. But I think it's something that as we move towards the integrated settlement and kind of thinking about how we implement that, we have got to be getting ahead of the curve, because I think it's going to be really, really important that we kind of maximise the opportunities that we'll get from that. And that does mean thinking a little bit differently about how we kind of use our resources, manage our resources, but also how we're kind of directing that resource to the priorities that as a partnership we feel are really critical. So I think that's a really important point, and it's definitely something that we're looking at, but we need to do more work, I think, around that particular theme.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to come in on this item, please? Moses, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I noticed a slightly more specific issue, but I noticed that there's that the West Yorkshire Transport Fund delivery, for example, has moved into risk, and I want to have some reassurance that as we work out how to manage that risk and get delivery done within the cost constraints that have been identified around inflation, that we won't lose sight of the projects that are already in progress through that scheme, that funding scheme. And I'm specifically thinking about projects in my area like Cooper Bridge, which have been delayed and shifted and reprofiled, but are still really important and strategically important for Kirklees. Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to pick that up, please? Alan, please. You can make a start. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've changed the combined authority in the autumn, changed the way in which we fund capital projects. So, and the reason that we did that was so that the combined authority, by that I mean members, not the officers, could choose to bring forward and prioritise projects which were ready, and take decisions based on things like, say, bus franchising, which requires us to purchase depots across the region. It's enabled us to bring forward projects and fund projects which are ready. There is nothing in the scheme, there's nothing in the transport fund schemes which has been deprioritised, but we have changed the funding model so that funding gets allocated to schemes at the point at which they're ready to go. That said, we've also reported to the Combined Authority that the West Yorkshire Transport Fund was established in 2014, and a lot of the costs were a mix of not entirely realistic or have moved on significantly since then for reasons that have been articulated around inflation and cost escalation and so on. And so the gap we have reported to the Combined Authority at the last time we did so was 400 million.
Yes,
something like that. So there is a big gap at the moment in between the total number of schemes which the region would like delivered and the amount of money that we have. Now, a key thing to remember though is that there are a number of fiscal decisions that the government needs to take, which will take place before that programme is complete. So I put it like this: we've got an amount of money at the moment to fund the West Yorkshire Transport Fund schemes, the City Region Sustainable Transport schemes, the Transforming City Fund schemes, mass transit, bus franchising, etc. And we have a pot which is currently constrained. However, we also have the opportunity to go to government at the next spending review, at the one after that, through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement number 2, to get additional funding as part of the single settlement, which will come in from next year. So, in summary, we currently do not have enough money to deliver everything that we would like to deliver, but there are opportunities coming up to fill the gaps.
Just to continue this double act, we're also this year finalising the process of producing an updated local transport plan for West Yorkshire, which is an incredibly important tool in terms of setting out both our transport policy and also investment priorities to government in what is a statutory document. So our ability to clearly articulate those priorities in the context of what we are trying to achieve in 2025 and looking forward into the 2030s is going to become incredibly important. There are, from that, I would advise that we see there are opportunities for us to go further in terms of what the devolution white paper then has to offer us. So, for example, within that capital pipeline that we have for West Yorkshire, we have a number of improvements to what's called our key route network, our primary road network in West Yorkshire, which actually sit in common with what National Highways is looking to achieve on the strategic road network. And one of the areas that the government has signalled through the devolution white paper is our ability to set up a new partnership arrangement with National Highways as part of a conurbation-wide stewardship of the key route network. I think that gives us renewed opportunities to look through National Highways at other funding streams that have not previously been available for us, so that we can deliver our pipeline through third-party funding streams and not always through what will always be a limited transport capital fund that we have directly available to us as the combined authority.
Thank you. Moses, please.
Thank you very much. Quite a comprehensive answer. I think I'm partially reassured in that this scheme, as you know, has been reprofiled within the originally agreed scope of funding that was allocated. We've done that so that the combined authority isn't overburdened by the inflationary impact on our broader set of capital schemes. But the Cooper Bridge one is and has always been at the end of the agreed delivery programme. So, but I still maintain that it delivers a lot of our shared priorities in terms of bus prioritisation, economic development, the interlink between the M62, Huddersfield, Leeds, Bradford. You know, it's still a really important scheme. So I was more reassured, Alan, by your response than Simon by yours, which seemed to be shifting it towards other funding stream possibilities. But thank you for the answer, and I will keep mentioning it because it.
I mean, just briefly to come back to my point in terms of the relationship, that Cooper Bridge is a great example of the relationship between our key route network and the performance of the strategic road network and the performance of National Highways on the strategic road network. As we know, it is a regular feature of queuing in the evening peak in particular on that junction on the M62. I think where we would like to go in that role as steward of the key route network is to really get into the ribs of a discussion with National Highways around how it becomes a joint priority.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this item? I don't see anybody, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 5, which is that we note the report. Is everybody happy with those, please? That's great, thanks. Shall we move on to item 6 in the pay policy statement? Is this you, Joe, please?
Thank you for reminding me. Everybody's had the opportunity to read through the paper. I think the key points that I would like to highlight really is this is our first pay policy statement, so a learning exercise for us. We wanted to do this to provide transparency and accountability in line with local authorities. It isn't something that we have to do, but we thought that it was the right thing to do, so hopefully you will be comfortable and agree with that with us. We would like to, if agreeable, publish this on an annual basis going forward, but in Q2, because that would make more sense time-wise. Hopefully you will be familiar with the policy statement, because we actually did quite a bit of benchmarking and working with partners in terms of what you already do, and we used that framework for our policy, as well as Greater Manchester and York and North Yorkshire CA. And unless you've got any further questions on the policy, I haven't really got anything else to add. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any questions or comments, please? I don't see any hands up, so I'll turn to the recommendations. And I'll take it everybody, there's no questions or comments, I take it everybody's happy with the recommendations on page 33. That's great, we'll take that as agreed and move on to item 7, please. And is it Gary or Damien introducing this, please.
Chair, I can introduce the report. This is the quarterly monitoring report, Q3. It's a build on, obviously, the previous quarter's report, and we're reporting a slight improvement in the revenue outturn from 700k off budget to an improvement to 500k. We're still obviously not delivering to the budget. 500k is still a number that we have got to work on. However, there's been a lot of work on looking at the forecasting, and the forecasting that I'm hearing that's not reflected in the Q3 report yet because of timing will be reflected in the Q4 report, and I'm confident that we'll bring in and deliver the budget for this year, of which that will be reported as part of the outturn and Q4 monitoring in the new year. In the report, it does detail some of the profiling on the capital programme that has slipped, and again there's a piece of work that's been undertaken, and that's looking at the capital projects and the programme and looking at actually making sure that the profiling is robust and removes any optimism bias, because if you start a project and with all the greatest intentions and you don't really challenge that sort of profile, you're setting yourself up to fail, because ultimately you'll end up slipping. So we want to use the word realism, but some sort of challenge into that profiling so that the capital programme monitoring reflects and doesn't show a massive slippage that actually was always going to be there, but actually the forensic analysis should have happened up front. So I think some capital monitoring work's going on behind the scenes. There's intense forecasting behind the scenes. However, at this moment in time, the Q3 monitoring position showing that we're slightly off delivering to budget, but I'm confident that we'll bring that in Q4, and that the capital monitoring again will be an improvement in the next report. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Scullion, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to probe the director's confidence, really, in terms of some of the risks, really, in terms of this year. Obviously, there was a release from reserves to help bolster the budget, and I'm thinking particularly of the risks relating to buses, the fact that there's a revenue consequence of buses having to be supported where the operators are withdrawn. There's obviously the mayor's fares, but that's particularly for the next financial year. The work that we've had to do in Bradford in relation to that, and the general challenge of the bus operators' reimbursement, and those are the in-year risks for this that we're bringing home this Q4. So I just wanted to just touch on those and surface them and just ask for further reassurance.
I think you're right to point those risks out. In terms of the transport pressures, that is something that we are constantly challenging with regard to the evidence. I think the business partnering has been strengthened with the addition of Jane Close, and she's really getting under the skin of those transport pressures and that evidencing, because obviously we've built that into the budget for 5-6, that those transport pressures are not baked in, but we're carrying them. So very mindful of that, and that's part of, I suppose, the zero basing of the budget for next year. At the same time, what you do is you look at this year's outturn, and you've got to look at the budget adequacy as it's outturning and what you've built in. So that exercise is underway. Bradford interchange, we have built in some risks. You know the number that's in the report. However, we're some of that we're hoping to manage behind the scenes when you talk about settlement and whatever else. But we're hoping that by Q1 next year there won't be any legacy costs that we're carrying in, and that we've got actually business as usual. However, it's right and prudent that we build in any of the risks that we've done. Hopefully they don't all materialise, but in forecasting world you've got to be prudent and put those risks in there, and they'll hopefully reduce in Q4. And then the Bradford interchange, transport, and the third area was bus.
It was bus.
Yeah, well, I think bus services and transport we interlink. It's the same answer I give on the overall transport programme.
Thank you, Simon, please.
Just to add and reassure members, so we are continuing to engage very closely with bus operators, encouraging them to identify as early as possible up front where they think they face challenges on their network, and we were whilst that has not always been successful. We have worked very hard to try and encourage the market to step forward where it can. It does remain as a significant risk for us, and is the reason why we have identified a specific programme of activity which is being overseen by Tim Taylor, our Transport Services Director, that is focused on a very clear network continuity plan through the next few years. We recognise that whilst bus franchising will bring, as it matures, the benefits that were agreed in the case, that a period of transition towards bus franchising will introduce the potential for some turbulence in the market, and we're looking to make sure that we're as far upstream in terms of managing those risks as we can be.
Thank you, Simon. Any more comments on this report? Take Jocelyn and then Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
Just a quick one. I wanted to say that I appreciate the glossary and the increased narrative in the report. It's very helpful, but I still want more detail. So can you reassure me that future reports will have more detail?
I can, and that is part of the change programme that we've got in place. Q4s will have a lot more detail. We've got a model report that we're going to be working towards. Much more forensic analysis. Every line of variance will have an explanation. It'll be cross-referenced. We'll also have some treasury management information, because we have obviously got interest on investments that needs to feature reserves drawdown and any further grants that we actually attract. The challenging with Q3 was that we were setting the budget at the same time that the Q3 timetable was happening, so some of the timing of getting the narrative changed and the structure of the report needed a bit more time. That's why I'm confident that Q4 will have a much more detailed analysis, for scrutiny and for reporting, along with making sure that reporting, if you like, is all in place for Q1 next year, because we're going through an implementation plan of the CIA project, the finance system. So we are forensically analysing our reporting to make sure that we are fit for purpose and we've got the right analysis.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just reflecting on the table 2, where enterprise zones have seen, so if I've read it correctly, have achieved significantly over budget, in fact, in terms of income. Two things really. First of all, if that's true, that's great, because a few years ago they weren't making much progress, but actually Combined Authority really pulled things around, didn't they, to start delivering on those, so that's good to see. And obviously it brings in an ongoing revenue, but secondly, obviously, just from an accounting point of view, we're a bit out there on the budgeting. I'd have thought business rates are pretty easy to predict, so I didn't quite understand why we're out.
Thank you. Damon, please.
If I may, this is all part of the zero-based budgeting exercise that we started earlier, to make sure that the budget is in the right ballpark based on evidence. I can't comment really on how the budget was constructed last year, but part of zero basing over a number of years, there is a number of budgets that actually don't align with the reality of what's happening. If you did a zero base every year, you would have a base budget quite constructed and could be monitored in the right way. Starting this process early will make sure that we get the budget right, the profiling for 5-6, and it is the reality that we've got increased income, so that will be reflected in the budget for 5-6.
Thank you. Are there more questions on this paper, please? I don't see anybody else with their hands up, so I'll turn to the recommendations, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. That's great, thank you. We'll move on to item 8, please, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. So again, our updated figures for quarter 3 have been presented. I think it's really quite a positive story. We are pretty much above the average and benchmarks in most of the areas. So obviously happy about that. I think the only 3 additional points I would like to take you through over and above the report are being at this place is not where we're resting on our laurels. We know we've got work to do, and our trajectory tells us, particularly around EDI, that we need to work faster and harder in terms of meeting the targets that we've got in the future. So this is something that we are continually working on and will continue to do and try and mature in terms of our approach here. So we going for our disability confident level 3, which is in the report, and we'll hopefully be able to start reporting on that more clearly after we've done the waiting period. We have also identified that we have a gap in terms of our employees and our disability figures, because we've got mismatches in things like our staff survey. We've got a higher percentage of people reporting as disabled than we have in our system. So we're currently working on how we can do a positive campaign across the organisation to try and really encourage people to actually put that information in. And that's based on a real positive message around why it's important, and to the confidentiality aspect of it, because that's really key here and is clearly, from the feedback that we've had, one of the biggest blockers. So we will also continue to work, and are continuing to work, in terms of our ethnic diversity, both in recruitment and in development. And I know we've talked to you about our Solace training course before, which has gone down, was really positive, and we've now also engaged with another organisation, Tile Hill, who have pulled together something called Different Leadership Development, and it's for much more senior levels. It's around trying to actually encourage and pick future senior leaders, CEOs, directors, and we have nominated somebody, and they've been successful for that. That's quite hot off the press. So that's really great, and we will continue to develop whatever we can in those particular spaces. I think that there's lots of active work going on here. In addition to that, after Councillor Hinchcliffe introduced me to Bradford, we started doing some work with Bradford, and that is because that Bradford University is takes on the largest amount of disabled students in our region, without doubt. I hadn't realised that, as well as a lot of other excellent work that they're doing. So we've now got an account manager with them and are working with them. Likewise, we've also met with Leeds City Council too, in terms of sharing our workforce plans, and all of us trying to mature together in terms of how we develop those. So I think my second point really is in line with what Sarah was saying around our focus and initiatives and our outcomes. Our workforce plans are being developed and redeveloped with that in mind too, and we are taking that 3-year longer outlook, exactly as you pointed out, Councillor Scullion, in terms of what does the future look like. What we need to look at that in terms of our internal resources, in terms of our requirement from an internal perspective too. And our workforce planning is definitely got that in mind, and we are, although we need to mature more in terms of how we do that, there's no doubt about that, we are definitely on the right trajectory for that, and we'll continue to grow and share that with you. And work at a local level with partners. And I think the last thing I wanted to share with you was our good news that we've actually just won an award, which I didn't know whether Alan was going to share this, which was about a gender equality champion so the awards are based on sort of self-nomination. They're not self-nominations or panels. They're earned through engagement from job seeking public, so it's really important to us, and we have just won. We were nominated for authentic content, wellbeing champion, and gender equality champion, and we won the gender equality champion. So that's something nice to celebrate. Any questions on the report?
Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
So thank you very much for that. Obviously, I mean, first of all, good to see the sickness levels are so low, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty good, really, is that? But just going through, obviously, with the sickness levels you've got, there's a big other there. I just wonder if that suggests that there may be other stuff going on that other that perhaps I presume you do back to work interviews and stuff like that to really get under the skin of that kind of thing, because it's quite a big, it's the biggest category there. So.
Yes, we do, and we also are trying to be more mature in terms of two things here. One is our reporting in terms of understanding what other is. And I think sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable. People are maybe not asking. They feel uncomfortable. The leaders feel uncomfortable about actually asking people certain questions when they're returning to work. So the second thing is our development of leadership qualities. So not just managerial qualities in terms of how we can actually really give our middle and senior managers competence and confidence to be able to lead in these particular areas. And sickness and sickness reporting is just one of many that we're picking up in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe again, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just obviously just seeing the EDI targets to 2030. Obviously, it seems on track, but there's still quite a long way to go, isn't there? And it's just what more can we help you with in that regard in terms of so you can't just switch it on. You need to do a long term. So like the university, that's great. Is there anything else we can do collectively to support you in that endeavour? So it's quite important for all.
So absolutely, if there are things, I'm more than happy to work with you. We are building a strategy that will help us, because I'm not confident that we would hit that target right now, but we will do if we put the strategy in place. So the kind of things that we're doing with trialling the account management at Bradford and an awful lot more early at it's early attraction, just reviewing the whole process for us. It's a key target area this year of reviewing the whole process for us from that early attraction right through to reward, and making sure that this is absolutely fundamental to all of it. So, and like I say, working with partners, and I'm starting to meet people who work in across the councils and share plans, as well as other combined authorities and outside industry, to be honest. So yes, very welcome, I would say. I think the other thing I'd like to add is that we're really I'm very, very keen, and as with everybody around, making sure this is something for everyone. So it's about making sure that they get written into people's kind of objectives. It's that leadership again around the thinking of through any EDI just on a normal basis, so that it becomes part of behaviour across the organisation. That's really where we want to be.
Thank you.
Just come back and I'll sorry. I just thinking about where it can help. I just wonder in Bradford, I'm sure we've got like industrial centres of excellence where employers work with young people who are in school to show them the way to different careers. It's getting involved in that early, isn't it? And I just wonder if there's something around our skills offer that some of it is funded by West Yorkshire that could be linked with what you're doing. Because to say that it's invested in young people now, so they see the opportunity, isn't it? Really, so. Perhaps there's something around the skills, so perhaps gets Felix and the skills leads involved. Thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to pick that one with Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, please? Asma, please.
Just following on from what's been said this week, EY Foundation are tapping into private sector to get them to mentor, and I'm on the panel of leadership. I'm on the panel for mock interviews and mentoring, and I think they're the sort of organisations that are already tapping into where is that talent pool going to come from that satisfies the EDI, so that we're not just looking internally, we're actually recruiting in people from different areas. So it might be something that you might want to pick up with EY Foundation, because I think they're doing a brilliant job.
I'll definitely look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody else want to come in? I don't see any more hands up, so I'll move to the recommendations on item 8. I take it everybody is happy with those. That's great, thanks. And we'll move on to item 9. Is this you, please, Caroline?
It is, Chair, thank you, yes. I think this is the first time we've brought the Corporate Risk Register to this committee. And this report does two things. One is shares a snapshot of that for the committee's benefit, and the second is to provide some context in terms of the work underway in relation to our risk management strategy development plan. I should just say, in terms of the private pack that members have, you've got 2 copies of the Corporate Risk Register there. Appendix 1 is the public version. Appendix 2 has some exempt information in that. If anybody wants to discuss the content of that exempt appendix, if you could please indicate at that point, because we'd need to stop the live stream and ask any members of the public to leave. You may not need to do that. So turning to the main report here, I suppose in terms of context, it is our Governance and Audit Committee, which is the responsible committee, and Councillor Scullion is nodding at the side of me because she is a member of that committee at the moment. And it is that committee that holds us to account in terms of our approach to risk management. And so that is the committee that is tracking our delivery underneath this risk management strategy development plan. And indeed, we've just agreed and just set up a member workshop, which is going to take place next month, where we will actually be working with members as part of that development to get clarity as to what the committee needs in order to assure itself that we are undertaking risk effectively in the organisation. So they will be working with us on the next iteration of that. And we have some really strong members of that committee. We have experts on that committee in the field of risk. So we will definitely get some really good check and challenge and collaboration in terms of taking that forward. So I think part of this is to give FRCC some reassurance that that work is actively being progressed and what the governance framework for that is. But then secondly, it is to share with you a current snapshot of our corporate risk register, because indeed those risks, as we looked at performance earlier, risks are very much related in terms of our performance framework, and it's important that this committee actually has sight of that as well, and the ability to check and challenge in terms of the content of that risk register. So we intend to continue to bring that forward to this committee on a regular basis. I say it's a snapshot. The actual risk register has more columns, it has more information that sits behind it than that's shown on the current version. I suppose the second thing is it is a horrible spreadsheet, which is very difficult to read the information across, both on screen and even if it's A3, it becomes the typeface is quite small. We recognise that it is our best tool at the moment for actively managing it. One of the things that we're looking to do in this next couple of months is to develop a different visual that we can bring the information forward to audiences in terms of what does that audience need from that, and how can we show this in a much more, much clearer way in terms of getting that information across. So I would hope by the next time FRCC sees the corporate risk register, it won't be in this form. It will be in a more meaningful form for you to interrogate and ask questions on. So it is work in progress. We know it's not ideal. In terms, the other thing I'd say about the risk register is at this present time, the risks on here have been effectively an updating and a cleansing of risks that we've had on since the summer. And the next stage for us will be to review this in terms of new, are there any new risks to come onto the risk register that aren't there at the moment? But we've moved quite considerably, I think, in terms of clarifying ownership, what the existing controls are and the assurance around those controls, and as importantly, what are the additional controls that we need to put in place in order to move our current risk rating from its current level and reduce that to its target risk rating. So there's quite a lot of work behind the scenes here. I'm really positive about the fact we've got member involvement in this, as well as very much senior leadership team driving this as part of its next iterations, but it will continue to change. I shall pause there because it may be
that it's more helpful for me to answer questions from the committee. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions on the public part of the papers first, or any general comments, and then just to be well organised, if anybody wants to speak below the line, we'll take that towards the end, is my suggestion. So if anybody has any questions or comments on the paper, please. As a regular passenger on Arriva buses, I agree about the operation. You say I can read it because I'm zooming in on my screen, and as a regular passenger on the Arriva buses, I agree bus operations are a very high risk. Councillor Scullion, please.
Chair, I just wanted to say from my experience on the Governance and Audit Committee, the renewed focus on risk actually in the work that's been done very recently, I think does show in this document in terms of it being very live and really concentrated focus given to it. So I've seen improvement at Governance and Audit certainly in the last year.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in, please? Great. Shall we supply magnifying glasses next time? Yeah. Jocelyn, please.
On financial sustainability, which I believe is a public section, the further action, further controls column, I can't see the beginning or the end of the text. So what am I missing?
Sorry, Chair, I think it's the way it's printed, isn't it? It's been condensed. We need to widen that column.
Moses is good on his screen.
Suppose. This is
Would you like to come in?
Sorry, it's PDF'd,
Yeah.
so we can't widen it. But what I can do is I can share with you the risk register, so we can home in when we have our one-to-one that section, if that is helpful.
Chair, it's maybe not the best way to do this, but I have got a copy of it, but I don't know what's the bit that's missing. It's the top, the first paragraph. On the further controls, yes. The first paragraph reads, I'm not going to make it bigger. Developing the content of the financial reporting and forecasting to enable early identification of cost pressures and variances. This includes monitoring inflation, material costs and labour costs. We've got the rest.
And review frequency.
And the bottom one.
Review frequency and resource.
Oh. This shows the problems with this spreadsheet, doesn't it? I don't think I can get that one to... I think we'll have to share this with you outside the meeting. My technical skills mean I can't actually get into that last line either. But that, yeah, therein lies the rub. The next time this committee sees this, it will be in a different format to enable you to effectively check and challenge. Yes, but we will share the full copy of this with members outside the meeting.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on this, please? Okay, I'm going to turn to the recommendations that are on page 87, but I think we should either note as a recommendation or a minute what Caroline has just said about sharing a full copy with members, so it's clear that that information, although there's formatting issues with these papers, that information is available to members. So to have it in a format we can all look at. So if we can add that as well, and I take it everybody is happy with that. That's great, thank you. And nobody has to speak on the confidential bit, so at that point I shall close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.